What is up, YouTube? But before I get into the video, let me remind you, if you like my content, hit that like and subscribe button. And also, if you feel the need to support me, hit me up on my Patreon at patreon.com/uncommonramen, capital U, capital R. I do all of this in my free time, so any amount of support can help me bring more of this content to you more often. Okay, today we are going to be looking at, I think it is my first Thunder Junction commander deck. And you know, unsurprisingly, it's a mono red. We're looking at Calamity, Galloping, Inferno. So yeah, we'll jump right in here. Calamity, Galloping Inferno is 4 and 2 red for a 4/6 with haste. When Calamity Galloping Inferno attacks while saddled, choose a non-legendary creature that saddled it this turn. Create a tapped and attacking token that is a copy of it. Sacrifice that token at the beginning of the next end step, and repeat this process once. And it has its saddle cost is 1. So basically, what we're going to be doing is looking for ETB and LTB effects. So let's take a look at the creatures. We're going to start with Cavalier of Flame. Seems like the appropriate starter person to saddle a Calamity, because that's what it looks like he's riding anyway. Cavalier of Flames is 2 and 3 red for a 6/5. It costs, or you can pay 1 and a red, and creatures you control gain +1/+0 and haste until end of turn. When Cavalier of Flames enters the battlefield, discard any number of cards, then draw that many cards. And when Cavalier of Flames dies, it deals X damage to each opponent and each planeswalker they control, where X is the number of land cards in your graveyard. Next up, we have Charming Scoundrel for 1 and a red. This is a 1/1 with haste. When it enters the battlefield, discard a card. Well, choose one. Discard a card, then draw a card, or create a treasure, or create a Wicked Roll token attached to target creature you control. Circuit Mender for 3. This is a 2/3. When it enters the battlefield, gain 2 life. When it leaves the battlefield, draw a card. Clone Shell for 5. This is a 2/2 with Imprint. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of your library, exile 1 face down, and put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. When Clone Shell is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, turn the exiled card face up. If it's a creature card, put it onto the battlefield under your control. Combustible Gearhulk for 4 and 2 red. This is a 6/6 with first strike. Whenever Combustible Gearhulk enters the battlefield, target opponent may have you draw 3 cards. If the player doesn't, you're going to put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard, and then Combustible Gearhulk is going to deal damage to that player equal to the total converted mana cost of those cards. Discerning Peddler for 1 and a red. This is a 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. Emrakul's Hatcher for 4 and a red. This is a 3/3. When Emrakul's Hatcher enters the battlefield, put 3 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn creature tokens onto the battlefield. They have sacrifice this creature, add 1 colorless to your mana pool. Next up is Fanatic of Mogus for 3 and a red. This is a 4/2. When Fanatic of Mogus enters the battlefield, it deals damage to each opponent equal to your devotion to red. Filigree Familiar for 3 colorless. This is a 2/2 3 generic. When Filigree Familiar enters the battlefield, you gain 2 life. When it dies, you draw a card. Goblin Chainwhirler for 3 red. This is a 3/3 with first strike. When Goblin Chainwhirler enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to each opponent and each creature and planeswalker they control. Hellspur Posse Boss. This is 2 and 2 red for a 2/4. Other outlaws you control have haste, and whenever Hellspur Posse Boss enters the battlefield, create 2 1/1 red mercenary creature tokens with tap. Target creature you control gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Activate only as a sorcery. Hoarding Dragon for 3 and 2 red. This is a 4/4 with flying. When Hoarding Dragon enters the battlefield, you may search your library for an artifact card, exile it, then shuffle your library. When Hoarding Dragon dies, you may put the exiled card into its owner's hand. Impulsive Pilferer for 1 red. This is a 1/1. When Impulsive Pilferer dies, you get to create a treasure token. It has Encore for 3 and a red. Meteor Golem for 7. This is a 3/3. When Meteor Golem enters the battlefield, destroy target non-land permanent an opponent controls. Mindclaw Shaman for 4 and a red. This is a 2/2. When Mindclaw Shaman enters the battlefield, target opponent reveals his or her hand. You may cast an instant or sorcery card from that player's hand without paying its mana cost. Patron of the Arts for 2 and a red. This is a 3/1. When Patron of the Arts enters the battlefield or dies, create a treasure token. Plundering Barbarian for 2 and a red. This is a 2/2. When Plundering Barbarian enters the battlefield, choose 1. Destroy target artifact or create a treasure token. Portraiser for 3 and 2 red. This is a 4/4. When Portraiser deals combat damage to a player, untap each creature you control. After this combat phase, there is an additional combat phase. Portraiser can't attack a player it has already attacked this turn. Professional Facebreaker for 2 and a red. This is a 2/3 with Menace. Whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, create a treasure token. Sacrifice a treasure, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. Rapacious Dragon for 4 and a red. This is a 3/3 with flying. When Rapacious Dragon enters the battlefield, create 2 treasure tokens. Rose Room Treasurer for 3 and a red. This is a 4/3 with Alliance. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, create a treasure token. If this is the first or second time this ability has resolved this turn. Otherwise, you may pay X. When you do, Rose Room Treasurer deals X damage to any target. Sorry, that's worded very strangely. Scampering Surveyor for 4. This is a 3/2. When Scampering Surveyor enters the battlefield, search your library for a basic land card or cave card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. Siege Gang Commander for 3 and 2 red. This is a 2/2. When Siege Gang Commander enters the battlefield, create 3 1/1 red goblin creature tokens, and for 1 and a red, you can sacrifice a goblin to have Siege Gang Commander deal 2 damage to any target. Skyscanner costs 3. It's a 1/1. It has flying. When Skyscanner enters the battlefield, draw a card. Solemn Simulacrum. This is 4 for a 2/2. When Solemn Simulacrum enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a basic land card, put that card onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. When Solemn Simulacrum dies, you may draw a card. Spawn of Thraxis for 5 and 2 red. This is a 5/5 with flying. When Spawn of Thraxis enters the battlefield, it deals damage to target creature or player equal to the number of mountains you control. Stalking Vengeance for 5 and 2 red. This is a 5/5 with haste. When another creature you control dies, it deals damage equal to its power to target player or planeswalker. Swashbuckler Extraordinaire for 2 and a red. This is a 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, create a treasure token, and whenever you attack, you may sacrifice 1 or more treasure tokens. When you do, up to that many target creatures gain double strike until end of turn. Terror of the Peaks for 3 and 2 red. This is a 5/4 with flying. Spells your opponent's cast that target Terror of the Peaks cost an additional 3 life to cast. And whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Terror of the Peaks deals damage equal to that creature's power to any target. Trumpeting Carnosaur for 4 and 2 red. This is a 7/6 with trample. When it enters the battlefield, discover 5. And for 2 and a red, you can discard Trumpeting Carnosaur. It deals 3 damage to any target. Sorry, to target creature or planeswalker, not any target. Wily Goblin. This is 2 red for a 1/1. When Wily Goblin enters the battlefield, create a treasure token. Wormcoil Engine for 6. This is a 6/6 with Death Touch and Lifelink, not Double Touch. When Wormcoil Engine dies, create a 3/3 colorless worm artifact creature token with Death Touch and a 3/3 colorless worm artifact creature token with Lifelink. And then Zealous Conscripts for 4 and red. This is a 3/3 with haste. When Zealous Conscripts enters the battlefield, gain control of target permanent until end of turn. Untap that permanent, it gains haste until end of turn. Alright, next up is Instants. We're going to start with an Abrade. For 1 and a red, choose 1. Abrade deals 3 damage to target creature or destroy target artifact. Big Score for 3 and a red as an additional cost to cast this spell. Discard a card, draw 2 cards, then create 2 treasures. Bolt Bend for 3 and a red. This costs 3 less to cast if you control a creature with power 4 or greater. Change the target of target spell or ability with a single target. Chaos Warp for 2 and a red. The owner of target permanent shuffles it into his or her library, then reveals the top card of his or her library, and if it's a permanent card, they put that onto the battlefield. Demand Answers for 1 and a red. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice an artifact or discard a card, draw 2 cards. Great Train Heist. This is a spree card for 1 red. Spree, you can do +2 and a red to untap all creatures you control. If it's your combat phase, there's an additional combat phase after this phase. For +2, creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain first strike until end of turn. And for +1 red, choose target opponent. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to that player this turn, create a tapped treasure token. And you can add all of those, or some of those, or just one of them. Depends on how much you want to spend on it. Thrill of Possibility for 1 and a red as an additional cost to cast this spell. Discard a card, draw 2 cards. Unexpected Windfall for 2 and 2 red as an additional cost to cast this spell. Discard a card, draw 2 cards, and create 2 treasure tokens. Right, next up is going to be sorceries, starting with Blasphemous Act. 8 and a red, it costs 1 less to cast for each creature on the battlefield, deals 13 damage to each creature. Chain Reaction for 2 and 2 red, deals X damage to each creature, where X is the number of creatures on the battlefield. Faithless Looting for 1 red, draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards, flashback for 2 and a red. Jessica's Will for 2 and a red, choose 1. If you control your commander, as you cast the spell, choose both. Add red to your mana pool for each card in target opponent's hand, or exile the top 3 cards of your library. You may play them this turn. Mana Geyser for 3 and 2 red, add red to your mana pool for each tapped land your opponents control. Seize the Spoils for 2 and a red, as an additional cost to cast this spell. Discard a card, draw 2 cards, and create a treasure token. Vandal Blast for 1 red, destroy target artifact you don't control. You can overload this for 4 and a red. Okay, next up is Artifacts. Starting with Arcane Signet, costs 2. You can tap it to add 1 mana of your commander's color identity. Cursed Mirror for 2 and a red. You can tap this for red. As it enters the battlefield, you may have it become a copy of any creature on the battlefield until end of turn, except it has haste. Fire Diamond costs 2. Enters the battlefield tapped. You can tap it for red. Hazard's Monument costs 3. Red creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. And whenever you cast a creature spell... is it just a creature spell? Oh. You may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. I always thought it was a red creature spell. Idol of Oblivion costs 2. You can tap this to draw a card. Activate only if you've created a token this turn. You can also pay 8 and tap this and sacrifice it to create a 10/10 colorless Eldrazi creature token. We've got Lightning Greaves that costs 2. Equipped creature has haste and shroud. Equips for 0. Mind Stone costs 2. You can tap this for colorless. You can also pay 1, tap this, and sacrifice it to draw a card. Panharmonicon, it costs 4. If an artifact or creature entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. Ruby Medallion, it costs 2. Red spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Soul Ring, it costs 1. You can tap this for 2 colorless. Swiftfoot Boots, this costs 2. Equipped creature has hexproof and haste, and it equips for 1. Wayfarer's Bauble costs 1. You can tap 2 and sacrifice. Wayfarer, tap 2, tap this, then sacrifice it. Search your library for a basic land card. Put that card onto the battlefield tap, then shuffle. And then I believe finally, yes, we have Whisper Silk Cloak. This costs 3. Equipped creature is unblockable. Equipped creature has Shroud, and it equips for 2. Next up is enchantments. Starting with Goblin Bombardment. This is 1 and a red. Sacrifice a creature. Goblin Bombardment deals 1 damage to any target. Impact Tremors for 1 and a red. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, Impact Tremors deals 1 damage to each opponent. Industrial Advancement. Industrial Advancement. Don't like that word. 3 in a red. At the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice a creature. If you do, look at the top X cards of your library, where X is that creature's mana value. You may put a creature card from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. And then finally we have Warstorm Surge. For 5 in a red, whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. Alright, next up is non-basic lands. We got Castle Embereth, which enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a mountain. You can tap this for red. You can also pay 1 and 2 red and tap this to have creatures get +1/+0 until end of turn. Forgotten Cave enters tapped, taps for red, cycles for 1 red. Myriad Landscape enters tapped, taps for colorless. You can pay 2 and tap this and sacrifice it to search your library for 2 basic lands that share a land type. Put them onto the battlefield tapped. And is it onto the battlefield tapped? It is. And then shuffle. Rogue's Passage, you can tap this for colorless. You can also pay 4 and tap this and have target creature may be unblockable until end of turn. Spinerock Knoll has Hideaway for 4, I believe, yes. You can tap it for red, enters the battlefield tapped, and you can pay 1 red and tap this to play the exiled card without paying its mana cost if an opponent was dealt 7 or more damage this turn. And then we have War Room. Taps for colorless. You can also pay 3 and tap this and pay life equal to the number of colors in your commander's color identity to draw a card. Alright, next up is going to be basic lands. We do have a high land count here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28 mountains. So that is going to be the Calamity Galloping Inferno deck tech. A large portion of this is just focused around ETBs. There are quite a few good LTB effects here. A lot of them are draw card type situations. But essentially what you want to do is get Galloping Inferno out, and then one of these creatures with any numerous ETB LTB effects, and then saddle them and create copies of them so that they get their ETB triggers, and then you end up sacrificing them so they'll get their LTB triggers. And there's quite a toolbox here, so you can do things like the Hoarding Dragon to get specific artifacts that you need into your hand, and Rapacious Dragon to get a bunch of treasures. Actually, it's quite a few ways to get a bunch of treasures, and it gives you a lot of options to help burn out your enemies, I suppose. So yeah, Calamity, Galloping Inferno. Yeah, if you have any questions or comments, leave those down below. Keep it positive. I will remove negative comments, and that's it, guys. Until next time, peace.